Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive with us. Today, we are going to be tackling U.S.-Canada trade relations.
Okay.
And
This is a big one.
it is a big one. It's a really fascinating one, too. And we've got a lot of interesting sources to dig into. So we've got a Korean analysis of this. We've got some recent news articles and even some historical context to
Nice.
see how we got to this point.
Yeah, having that kind of historical perspective, I think, is going to be really key here because
Very.
this is not a new thing at all. We can go way back to kind of see how this has been playing out for a long time.
So let's start with the tariffs that Trump imposed on Canadian goods. And,
Yeah.
what was the thinking there?
Well, he slacked a 25% tariff on a whole bunch of different Canadian imports.
Oh, wow.
And steel and aluminum were the ones that were really targeted.
Okay.
And it's a good reminder of just how closely connected the two economies are.
Right.
Yeah. It's not just about the numbers.
Yeah. Of course, Canada didn't just sit back and take that, though.
Oh, no, they absolutely did not.
And what was their response?
Well, they came back swinging with their own set of tariffs.
Okay.
They targeted about $15.5 billion worth of U.S. goods.
Okay.
But it gets really interesting when you start to look at how the individual provinces reacted.
Yeah. Okay, tell me about that.
So, for example, British Columbia, they proposed this toll on commercial vehicles going to Alaska.
Oh, that's a big one. Because, like,
Like,
BC and Alaska, they have such a close relationship.
Yeah, they do.
But Alaska relies on Canada for all sorts of things, right? Transportation, access to the rest of the U.S.
Absolutely. You're totally right. The Alaska Highway, it runs right through Canada.
Yeah.
And it's not just the roads either.
Yeah.
We're talking flights, shipping, even energy infrastructure like pipelines.
Yeah, so BC is really using its geography to its advantage here. It seems like that toll could have a real impact on Alaska's economy.
It definitely could.
What do you think, though? Could this be enough to make the U.S. reconsider its tariffs?
Well, it's a really strategic move.
Yeah.
And I think it shows how this is not just a federal issue in Canada.
Right.
The provinces are getting involved and they're finding some pretty creative ways to push back.
It really paints a picture of a nation ready to stand its ground.
Yeah.
But are all of the provinces taking such a hard line? Because I know, for example, Alberta has advocated for a bit of a different strategy.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, you see that mix of bold action, but also a call for unity.
Yeah.
Alberta is really urging everyone to prioritize national unity, eliminate those internal trade barriers, and really focus on those resource projects that could boost exports.
Right. It's more about strengthening Canada as a whole.
Exactly.
And presenting that united front.
Yeah.
So we see this mix of, like, going it alone, but also banding together. It really shows how these tensions are affecting all levels of Canadian society. But let's zoom in on some of those specific provincial responses. What are some other standout moves that you've seen?
So on top of that toll proposal, British Columbia, they're really promoting internal trade, and they're prioritizing Canadian goods and services in all of their government stuff.
Okay, so it's about boosting their own economy, but also sending a clear message.
Exactly.
What about other provinces?
Well, Nova Scotia, they're taking a more aggressive stance.
Okay.
They're banning U.S. companies from government contracts. They're doubling tolls on commercial vehicles from the U.S., and they're even taking U.S. liquor out of their government-run stores.
Well, that's pretty serious.
Yeah.
And it seems like that liquor thing is a trend.
It is.
Manitoba's doing the same thing, right?
Yep. They're removing all U.S. liquor from their provincial stores.
Wow.
And Newfoundland and Labrador are doing the same thing with liquor.
Okay.
Plus, they're halting procurement of U.S. goods and services, and they're actively looking for new markets outside of the U.S.
So it's about diversification.
Yeah.
It's about not relying on the U.S. as much.
Exactly.
It's almost like these tariffs, while they're disruptive, they're forcing Canada to think outside the box.
That is a fantastic point. It really is.
Yeah.
It seems like these tensions are forcing Canada to reevaluate its entire trade strategy.
Absolutely. And to understand this reaction even better,
Yeah.
we need to look back a bit. This isn't the first time that the U.S. and Canada have had these trade disagreements, is it?
Oh, definitely not. This is just the latest chapter in a long and very complicated story.
Okay, so let's dive into that history then.
All right.
Okay, so let's dive into that history then.
Yeah.
What are some past conflicts that really echo these current tensions?
Well, one that immediately comes to mind is the softwood lumber dispute.
Ah, yes. The softwood lumber saga. Been going on for ages, right?
Well, it has since 1982. The U.S. keeps accusing Canada of subsidizing its lumber industry,
Right.
which leads to tariffs, countermeasures. It's a whole thing. It seems like every few years it flares up again.
It really shows how these disagreements can drag on. Are there other examples from history where protectionist measures from the U.S. cause problems?
Absolutely. We can look back to the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act of 1930.
That sounds familiar. Wasn't that during the Depression?
It was. The Smoot-Hawley Act raised tariffs on thousands of imports.
Wow.
Including a lot from Canada, which is America's biggest trading partner at the time. Canada retaliated with its own tariffs, and it actually made the economic downturn even worse for both countries.
It's a reminder of how much damage these tit-for-tat moves can do. So even before Trump, there was this tendency towards protectionism in U.S. trade.
You could say that.
Yeah?
And there are even more recent examples. Like in 1971, Nixon put a 10% surcharge on imports,
Okay.
including those from Canada. It caused tensions until they sorted out a currency agreement. And then in 2002, George W. Bush put tariffs on steel, although Canada and Mexico were initially exempt because of NAFTA.
So it seems like these flare-ups happen even when there are trade agreements in place.
Right. It makes you wonder how effective they really are.
Totally. And those steel tariffs were eventually withdrawn because of global backlash and WTO rulings.
Yeah.
That shows how this issue keeps coming up.
Yeah, it does.
Speaking of the WTO, that brings us to the legal side of things. Canada is arguing that these new tariffs were actually breaking trade agreements, right?
Exactly. Canada's argument is that these tariffs violate both the USMCA and WTO rules.
And just to remind our listeners, the USMCA is?
The USMCA is the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement. It's supposed to eliminate tariffs on goods traded between the three countries.
Okay, thanks for clarifying.
Yeah.
And what about the WTO? What rules are we talking about there?
Well, Canada says the U.S. is breaking rules about most favored nation treatment and bound tariff rates.
It seems like a pretty open and shut case. What's the U.S.'s defense then?
Well, they're probably going to use those national security exceptions that are in a lot of trade agreements.
Right.
They might even try to tie it to the fentanyl crisis and say
Right.
it's about saving American lives.
The national security argument, that seems to be pretty common these days.
Yeah, it does. It's definitely a concern because it undermines the whole system of global trade.
Can you explain why that is? Why is using the national security argument so concerning for global trade?
Well, the rules-based system overseen by the WTO has been crucial for keeping things stable and predictable. If countries start using national security too loosely, it erodes trust and then everyone starts doing it.
Right.
It could lead to more and more protectionism and ultimately hurt everyone.
It sounds like Canada has a strong case, but the U.S. might try to find loopholes. What are Canada's options in this legal fight?
Well, they can challenge the tariffs through the USMCA dispute settlement process.
Okay.
It can take a while, but it allows for retaliation if the U.S. doesn't follow the rulings.
So it could drag on, but at least there's a process in place.
Right.
What about the WTO? Can Canada do anything there?
Oh, for sure. They can file a complaint with the WTO.
Okay.
But the challenge is enforcement. It's hard to make a country, especially a powerful one like the U.S., follow WTO rulings if they don't want to.
So legal battles are important, but it seems like a real resolution will come down to negotiations and political pressure. It's not all about fighting back, though, is it? You mentioned before that Canada is also trying to diversify.
Yes, exactly. Canada's working to rely less on the U.S. market.
In what ways?
Well, they're building on existing free trade agreements like the CPTPP.
The CPTPP, now just remind our listeners what that is.
Oh, sure. The CPTPP is a comprehensive and progressive agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership. It includes countries like Japan, Australia, and several others.
Okay, so it opens up a lot of markets.
Yeah, exactly. And they're also working on CETA.
What's CETA?
CETA is the Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement. It's a deal with the European Union.
Wow, so a lot of potential there.
Huge potential. These agreements help Canadian businesses export to all sorts of different places instead of just focusing on the U.S.
It's like spreading their risk.
Exactly.
But can they really shift away from the U.S. that much? It's still their biggest trading partner.
Well, it's a long game. The government is helping industries adapt to these new markets.
Okay. Plus, you see individual provinces taking action. British Columbia, for example, is looking for new markets like crazy. And the Atlantic provinces are increasing seafood exports to Europe.
Wow. It's fascinating how these tensions have forced Canada to rethink things.
Right.
It's like a wake-up call to become more independent.
You could say that it's pushing them to be more global and less reliant on just one partner.
And this brings us to a really important question. What's the long-term impact on the U.S.-Canada relationship? You know, they have this long history of friendship and cooperation, but these tensions feel different somehow.
I agree. There's definitely a sense that things have changed. It's not just about trade anymore.
Right.
It feels like there's a bigger political and ideological gap opening up between the two countries.
Yeah, it really does feel like we're at a turning point. These trade tensions seem to be like a symptom of a much bigger shift in the relationship between the two countries. What do you think is causing this rift? Well, I think the political climate in the U.S. is a huge factor, you know, with the current leadership and how unpredictable things have been.
Right.
And how they're using tariffs as a political tool. It creates a lot of uncertainty for Canada, and it's like the rules have changed.
You mentioned before that the U.S. keeps using that national security argument to justify these protectionist measures.
Yeah.
Why is that so worrying for Canada?
It's worrying because it goes against how trade diplomacy usually works. You know, Canada and the U.S. have always been close, but using national security to justify tariffs could set a dangerous precedent.
Right.
It could make it easier for the U.S. to do the same thing again in the future, even to its allies.
So could this actually cause some permanent damage to the relationship, or is it just a temporary setback?
It's hard to say they've resolved trade disputes before, but this one feels different.
Yeah.
The political climate and the fact that there's less trust in the whole global trade system makes it really hard to predict what will happen.
It's a lot to think about. What are some of the possible scenarios that could play out from here?
Well, on one hand, this could be a wake-up call for both countries. It could force them to step back and look at their relationship and find new ways to cooperate.
Okay.
Maybe it'll lead to a stronger commitment to the rules-based trading system and a strengthening of institutions like the WTO.
So a kind of reset for the relationship.
Exactly. A chance to fix the underlying problems and build a better partnership.
But there's also a chance things could get even worse.
Right? Definitely. If things keep escalating, it could turn into a much more adversarial relationship with a lot of distrust and retaliation.
And it seems like Canada is getting ready for that possibility with its diversification strategy, expanding into new markets to become less reliant on the U.S.
That's a really important point, no matter what happens with the U.S.-Canada, is making sure it has options and control over its own economic future.
So even with all this uncertainty, Canada's being proactive.
Absolutely. They're not just reacting. They're shaping their own path.
Well, this has been a fascinating deep dive. It's been full of twists and turns. What stands out to you the most as we've explored this whole issue?
For me, it's how Canada is handling these challenges. They're standing up for themselves, looking for new opportunities, and showing how resilient they are.
It's a good reminder that even when things are uncertain, you can still think strategically and take action.
And it leaves us with a lot to think about, given everything we've discussed. Where do you think the U.S.-Canada trade relationship is headed?
It's tough to say for sure, but one thing is clear, this relationship is at a crossroads, and the decisions made in the next little while are going to have a huge impact. We encourage everyone to keep learning about this issue and stay informed about how things develop between these two countries. Thanks for joining us for another deep dive.